Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. Today, the 24th day of the month of Sivan, 7th of June of the year 2018, and we continue with our studies today in the prophet Zechariah and in Likutei Moharan of Rabbi Nachman. Just before we do begin, let me again remind you that there will be no classes next week, since I will not be here in Yerushalayim during the week, and God willing, our classes will resume on Sunday a week, which is Sunday the 17th of June, when I will on Sunday in my Shavuot Tov spot be talking about some perspectives I've gained after 6 years of intensive discussions with leaders of Torah-seeking communities across Black Africa. And then on the following day, on Monday, the 18th of June, we shall continue, God willing, with our studies in Zechariah and in Likutei Moharan in our Avram's Tent Kollel framework. So next week we shall be in an intermission with respect to our classes. And for now, let us turn to the study of Zechariah chapter 5. Shalom. Today, the 24th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5778, corresponding to the 7th of June of the year 2018. We come today to the prophecies in chapter 5 of Zechariah, which are part of the extensive series of prophecies that began in chapter 1, verse 7, with the second round of Zechariah's prophecies, which had begun already in the second year of Darius of Persia in the 8th month, and then continued, as we learn in chapter 1, verse 7. A new prophecy began on the 24th of the 11th month, the month of Shevat of that same year, the second year of Darius. And indeed, this series of prophecies goes through to the end of chapter 6, after which a new section, a new cycle begins in Zechariah, as we shall be seeing. But for now, let us understand that the parshiot, the sections in our present chapter 5, are part of this extensive series, which ranges from prophecies about the rebuilding of the second temple to the very far-off perspective of the rebuilding of the future temple, in the wider perspective of the four great empires unto which Israel were in exile, of which the exile of Babylon had already passed in Zechariah, but the three exiles of Persia with Media, Greece, and Rome, joined with Edom and Ishmael until the end of days. These are going to come up again in chapter 6, which is the concluding section of this present cycle of prophecies. But here in chapter 5, we have some typical examples of the very obscure imagery which we find in the prophet Zechariah. And starting in chapter 5, verse 1, we see that Zechariah will speak about the flying scroll. And as we do come to look at chapter 5, verses 1 onwards, about the Megillah Afah, the flying scroll, let us recall that already in the prophet Ezekiel, whose life will have overlapped with Zechariah. Ezekiel was an older, and from the earlier generation, Ezekiel had come to Babylon already with the first exile of Judah under King Jechoniah, and Ezekiel prophesied in Babylon throughout the period of the destruction of King Solomon's temple. And after the destruction of the temple, Ezekiel continued to prophesy to the communities in Babylon, and indeed came to prophesy about a future temple. And Ezekiel was one of the main teachers, together with Baruch ben Neriah, the student of Jeremiah, of Ezra and Zechariah. And in Ezekiel chapter 2, which comes after the opening vision of Ezekiel, when the heavens were opened and Ezekiel saw the Merkavah, the divine chariot, as it were, in chapter 2, after all this display of glory, we find that the Almighty turns to Ezekiel and begins to warn him about the very difficult mission that he has with this Meri, this rebellious nation that he's going to be faced, and he's warned that he's going to have to be strong and firm. And then in Ezekiel chapter 2, from verses 9 and 10, we also have a prophecy about the flying scroll. And let us, before turning to our prophecy in Zechariah chapter 5, take a look at these words of Ezekiel in chapter 5, in chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. As the prophet is watching, he says, "Vo'er'eh v'henei yod shalucho Eloi." As I was looking, behold, there was a hand that was sent forth to me. V'hinei voi Megillas Sefer. In it was a scroll of a book. Vayeforoso iso lefonai. He spread it out, he unrolled it before me. V'hichesuvo ponim ba'ochor. This Megillah, this scroll, was written ponim on its face and ochor on its back. It could also mean forwards and backwards. V'chosuv eileho kinim vohege vohi. Written upon it were dirges and lamentations and woes. One could also see this depiction of this flying scroll in relation to the mysterious hand that wrote on the wall of the palace of Belshazzar in Babylon, sealing the fate of Babylon, as this was deciphered by Ezekiel. So we have this concept of the hand that writes in these prophecies in Daniel, Ezekiel, and now, as we shall see, in Zechariah. Continuing with the prophecy in Ezekiel, moving forward to chapter 3, verse 1 of Ezekiel. Vayomer Elai ben Odom Esa shetimtso echol esa megilo hazois velech daber el bnei Israel. He said to me, "Son of man, whatever you can find to eat, go eat. But essentially you must eat this scroll. You must internalize it, digest it, and it is part of your very being, and then go and spread this teaching to the house of Israel." I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. Vayomer Elai ben Odom bitnecho sa'achil ume'echo smalei eis hamiglo hazois asher ani noisen elocho v'oichlo vadhi mipefi kidevash lemosoik. So he said to me, "Son of man, feed your stomach and fill your belly with this scroll that I am giving to you." And indeed the prophet says, I consumed this, and it was like honey for sweetness in my mouth. And these were the words that the prophet then had to speak to the people. Well, now returning to our text in Zechariah chapter 5, let us look at his words here, chanting the Hebrew of Zechariah now in the cantillation of the prophets. Va'ashuv v'heso einai v'er'eh v'hinei megilo ofo. And I came back, this is to connect our present prophecy of Zechariah with the prophecies in the previous sections, all of which are parts of one cycle. V'ashuv, I came back I looked again, and there I saw there was the flying scroll. Verse 2, Vayomer Elai Mo'ato ro'eh V'hoimar Ani ro'eh Megilo ofo Oreko esrem bo'amo V'rochabo eser bo'amo. He said to me, this angel that is speaking in the prophet, what do you see? And he says, well, I see this flying scroll whose length is 20 cubits, a cubit being the distance from the average person's tip of their middle finger to their elbow, a cubit. V'rochbo eser bo'amo, its breadth is 10 cubits. And we shall presently look more carefully at verse 3 about what is the content and the implications of this scroll. But before we do, let us just turn to our commentators, including first and foremost Rashi. Megillah Ophor. Well, Rashi picks up that the term Ophor, which we've been translating as the flying scroll, which is a very vivid metaphor. Our sages interpreted this Hebrew word Ophor as something that is folded up. Indeed, we see how a bird, when it flies, is constantly folding and unfolding its wings, and we do find the root Ayin Pei, Ayin Yud Pei, as being something that is closed up on itself. Shaktiro Kesuvo Bo. They said, our sages, that the Torah was written on this scroll. V'lomdu mikan she'oilom echod mi 3,200 b'Torah k'deisu ba'eruvin. There is a calculation in the Talmud, Tractate Eruvin, how we learn out from the dimensions of this scroll that the entire physical world is merely 1 part to 3,200 of the dimensions of the supernal Torah, whose dimensions far, far exceed the dimensions of this narrow physical world. Jonathan, the Targum of Yonatan ben Uziel, translates the expression as we've been translating into English previously, Megillah Perecho, the scroll that is flying. Perachas ba'avir. It's flying in the air. According to the simple meaning of this section, Megillas Puranus Oyeso. It is a scroll of impending retributions. Vehu Shero Yecheskel, that is exactly the one that Ezekiel also saw some years previously in Ezekiel's opening prophecy. V'chosov Eleo Kinim Behegevahoy, written on that scroll of Ezekiel, as we've just seen in the text of Ezekiel chapter 2 and 3. Written upon it were the dirges and the lamentations and the woes. So here at the outset of the building of the Second Temple, already in association with all of the prophecies we've been seeing about the restoration of the kingship in the form of Zerubbabel and the restoration of the spiritual leadership in the form of Yehoshua, the high priest, in the previous sections of this cycle of prophecies, we now see this very, very stark symbol of retribution that is coming forth out from the temple, as we shall see. All of these, according to our commentators, all of these visions that Zechariah now has, the present one and the ensuing visions, are coming forth from the temple. That is to emphasize that the temple is not merely a ritual center for Israel that sits in Jerusalem, and people come to the temple and offer their prayers and sacrifice are elevated. We must recall that by the side of the temple building, at the side of the temple courtyard, are sitting the Sanhedrin, the supreme court of Israel. And it's from the Sanhedrin that Torah goes forth to Israel and to the whole world. And indeed, in the ensuing portions, we are seeing from the hand of the prophet, from the vision of God, that the significance of the temple is as a center from which justice and righteousness must go forth from the temple to the world. And with that in mind, let us now turn to the Hebrew text of the ensuing verses in Zechariah, verse 3. Vayomer Elai Zohis Ha'olah Hayoitzeis al Panei Chol Ha'oretz Ki Chol Hagoynehiv Mizeh Kamoi Ho V'chol Hanishpo Mizeh Kamoi Ho. The exact interpretation of this verse is subject to a variety of opinions. In our commentators, to first establish a basic pshat, a simple meaning. The angel is indeed establishing for the prophet, Vayomer Elai, he says to me, Zeis ha'olo hayotzes al panei chol ha'oretz. This is the curse which is going forth over the face of the whole earth. And it's a curse not against idolaters at this point, not against people who breach the rituals of the Torah in other ways, but rather a curse against people who disrupt the basic justice that must rule in society, who steal from one another, and having stolen from one another, they go on to swear falsely, swear blindly by the name of God that they did not steal, and thereby disrupt the whole process of judgment. And as we see from our English translation here, the simple pshat, simple meaning would be, Ki kol hagoynev mizeh, everyone who steals mizeh from this side of this double-sided scroll that is folded over or has these two sides, komoiho niko, like what is written in the curse. So far, this person has been cleansed. Everybody who has taken an oath, that is to say, a false oath, as is forbidden on the other side of the scroll, the sanctions of the scroll, so far, according to that sanction, this person has so far gone unpunished, but that will not remain the case. Verse 4, Nehum Adonai Tzvaos Ova ele beis haganov V'ele beis hanishmo b'shemi La shoker V'la nebesoich beisai V'chilatu es Eyn Sof V'es avonov. But God says now, no longer will the earth be without justice. I'm taking forth this principle of retribution, displaying it, revealing it, bringing out forth into the world, says the Lord of hosts. It will come all the way, the retribution as written in the curse, right into the house of the thief, the robber, and into the house of the person that has taken an oath in the name of God falsely, and it will dwell inside those sinners' houses, and it shall destroy the very wood and the very stones of the houses. Well, now, to follow through with our other commentators on these verses about the Megillah Ophor, the flying scroll, take a look at some of the Midrashim. First, let us take a look at the words of the Talmud in Masachet Eruvin, where it speaks about the concept of this scroll with its dimensions of 10 by 20 cubits being 32,000 times the size of the world. Here we're talking about the interaction between the physical world and the metaphysical world, says the Talmud over there in Eruvin. What does this mean when King Solomon says that I have seen the end of every purpose, but this is actually the words of King David, I'm sorry, in the Psalms. I've seen the end of every earthly purpose, but your commandment is so very broad. This matter, David stated it in the Psalms, but he did not explain it. Job also made the same point, and likewise Ezekiel made the same point, but never explained it until there came the prophet Zechariah, the son of Iddo, and explained it. As we find it in our present section, where the angel says to the prophet, what do you see? And he says, I see the Megillah Afah, this folded scroll or flying scroll, its length 20 cubits and its breadth 10 cubits. So now that means that if it's folded, says the Talmud, if you open it up, or perhaps if you peel the parchment and peel it into two, because it's written on both sides, panim v'ochor, on the face and on the back, so that makes it 20 by 20. First of all, the Talmud says, well, if you unfold it, it's 20 by 20. Since it's written panim v'ochor in the face and on the back, if you peel it, how much would there be? That would be 40 by 20 and 40 by 20 cubits. Well, now, the verse in the prophet Isaiah says, who has measured in his footstep the waters, and who has measured the heavens with the zeret, with the span of his hand? Who has measured the heavens by the zeret? And because of the relationship between the zeret, which is half a cubit, if you do all the multiplication correctly, you get to the point that the entire world, which was created in the zeret, the span of the hand of God, is only one part of 3,200, the dimensions of the metaphysical Torah. So that is a midrash on this, alluding to how the prophet is actually seeing the enormous power of the Torah appear to him in his vision. But then what is this Torah, what is this curse all about? First of all, writes the Metzudat David on these verses, he says, the prophet went back and lifted up his eyes above, and he saw, here's the flying Megillah, the flying scroll, and the firmament of the heavens, and this was the scroll of punishments, of retributions, akin to that which Ezekiel saw. And he says, Orko esrim kibidas beis koche hagodoshim, the actual dimensions of the scroll, he says, its length is 20 cubits, which is the same as the size of the Holy of Holies, which in the Second Temple was 20 by 20, to allude to the fact that at the time of the retributions, eventually this temple would be destroyed, the Holy of Holies would be destroyed. And he continues to explain Metzudat David, Zois ha'olah, this is the curse, and this scroll was inscribed and written, the curse that was coming forth as a decree against the face of all of the land of Israel, as if already the verdict and the decree had come out in writing from the supreme heavenly court. Ki kol ha'goyniv mizeh, now the Metzudat will give his explanation of this very mysterious verse 3. Kol ha'goynev mizeh. Kol ha'goynev mizeh, says the Metzudat David, everybody who steals from this, that is the words in the verse. The scroll, he says, was written on its panim, on the outer face, v'ochor, the behind, as had been its behind, has been seen by Ezekiel, who uses the phrase panim v'ochor, on the face and on the back. And that's why he says that everybody who steals material wealth has that crime marked on the one side. And then when the verse goes on, say, Komoiho Niko, like it shall be will be cleansed. This wants to say that just as the retributions that are written in the scroll, so eventually the sinner will be cleansed, in the sense of being cleaned out from the world, to be cut off from it. So Rashi on the same verse explains it in the way that had been explained in our English translation, that until now the people have not had the full retribution, and that is why so far they'd gone unpunished. That is how Rashi and our English translation had taken the word nikor, that so far they'd been kept clean from the punishments. But Metzudat David says no, the punishment is already written on the scroll and it will be sure to come out. The Radak on our verse says that it's not clear to us on to which time is this prophecy said, to which period is it referring. And it would appear that it was specifically related to the time of the prophet, because we see in the book of Ezra numerous sins that they had in their hands, their thefts, their false oaths, and therefore therefore came forth this curse, because theft, even though it is not nearly as serious as a false oath by the name of God and speaking falsehoods, nevertheless it is from the original theft that the thief subsequently denies, and denies in court under oath that he committed it. It's from that initial theft that came forth this very serious false oath. And says Radak, continuing, his having seen this scroll with the dimensions of the 20 cubits by 10 cubits, according to our previous commentators, says Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, because he saw it coming forth from the vestibule of the temple, which was indeed 20 cubits wide, and its breadth was 10 cubits. This is the ulam, the opening vestibule or portico of the temple. That was its size in the time of the building of Solomon. And even though Solomon's temple was already destroyed, this scroll had already gone forth from the temple of Solomon, and that is why it had those dimensions. And now the curse is coming forth. Continues Radak, it comes forth going over all the earth, that is to say, the land of Israel. Says Targum Yonatan, quoted now by Radak, this is the oath that is destined to come forth. And this is akin to the scroll that Ezekiel saw that was written Panim Ochor on its front and on its back. And this Megillah that was seen now by Zechariah was also written on both sides, and on one side was written that everybody who steals will be cleansed. On the other side, it was written that everybody who swears falsely will be cleansed, and just as they had done, so they would have retribution taken from them. Because the Megillah, the scroll, was written with the scroll and with the curse on one side and on the other, and Radak also explains the word nichrat. The person will be cleaned out of the land, will be cut off from the land, who will not be cleansed. We see in the 13 attributes of mercy in Exodus after the sin of the golden calf that the 13th attribute is v'naker, that God will cleanse the sinner if he repents. But if the sinner does not repent, immediately afterwards comes the words lo yenaker. So the word naker and yenaker, the phrase which is obviously alluded to here in our verse in Zechariah, alludes to this double-edged sword, that if the sinner will repent, he will be cleansed, but if he does not, he will be cleaned out of the world. And now, at the end of his comment on this verse, Radak mentions why this is repeated in Zechariah when it had already been mentioned in Ezekiel. The prophet saw the scroll. He didn't. Our prophet Zechariah did not see what was written in it, as Ezekiel had seen it, until the angel drew his attention to it. And the reason was because the power of prophecy was successively becoming diminished, and that is why the visions of Zechariah are so closed up, because by the time of the visions of Haggai, Zechariah and Malachi, prophecy ceased. And now, going back to the text of Zechariah in verse 5, he goes on to a new phase of this prophecy. Another vision, verse 5 in the Hebrew text. Vayetzehi hamaloch al doiver bi, vayomer elai, sono einecho urei, mo ayoitzehis hazois. And went forth again the angel that was speaking in me. This verb here, vayetzeh, he went, would carry connotations of a new level of revelation that the angel is going to bring to the prophet. He says to me, lift up your eyes again. What do you see now? What is coming forth now? And the prophet is not clear about it. Verse 6, V'oimar mahi, Vayoimer, Zois oefo hayoitzeis, Vayoimer, Zois einom bechol ha'oretz. And I said, well, what is this? The prophet cannot yet discern what it is. Vayoimer Zois ha'efo. This is the ephah. The ephah is one of the basic biblical units of measurement of grain, as in the case of the measure of all of the grain sacrifices on the altar in the temple, which are measured in units of 1/10 of an ephah. The ephah is a larger measure. The omer, which we hear about as the measure of the manna which the Israelites received daily in the temple, was asiris ha'ephah, ha'omer asiris ha'ephah, and likewise in the sacrificial portions, asiris ha'ephah, 1/10 of the ephah measure, is the is a standard measure of cubic capacity for dry grain and other dry products. Well, now, what we are hearing here from the prophet is that a measurement is coming forth, and this measurement, Zois Einom B'chol Ha'oretz, this measure is what is going to be visited upon those whose eye is in all of the land. These are the people who are looking around and see where they can gain, where they can exploit, where they can make a profit. We have already in the earlier prophets, the earlier shorter prophets, we have depictions in Amos and Micha of the terrible corruption that was going on in the times of the first temple, and this was continuing as we see reflected in the book of Ezra in the times of the building of the second temple, and from there onwards, where merchants would reduce the actual size of the ephah with which they were supposed to measure out produce to the customer, while they would increase the shekel, the money that they would take from the customer for that reduced ephah. So here now, out of the second temple, out of the source of justice and true measurement for the world, is coming forth this measure. And this phrase, Einam b'chol ha'oretz, their eyes are in all the land, where the angel says zois, the Hebrew word zois Kabbalistically has the connotation of the attribute of judgment, the attribute of malchut. This ephah, which is a measure, which is alluding to God's attribute of justice and vengeance, this is Einam b'chol ha'oretz. It's against those Einam who their eyes are in all the land. And now the prophet in verse 7 discerns more what it is. Vehinei kikar oiferes niseis vezois isho achas yosheves besoicho hefo. So here is a kikar oiferes. This measure turns out to be a kikar, that is a roll of lead. The Hebrew word kikar could refer to a loaf of bread, or here a hunk of metal, of heavy lead. And oferes is the ultimate in the element of afar of creation, the lowest of the four elements, afar, whose letters are present in the Hebrew word for lead, oferet, this very heavy material. This is the full rigor of midat amalchut, the attribute of kingship that is being inflicted. V'zois isho achas, this attribute of retribution is signified by this one woman there that is sitting inside the ephah. She is representing this attribute of wickedness that is being punished by this attribute of strict measure. And the angel now goes on to allude, Vahiyomer zois horish oho, vayashleichoisom eletoicho hefo, vayashlech es even oiferes elepiho. And he said, this indeed, this is wickedness, this is the embodiment of wickedness, this image of this woman you have seen riding on this, she was sitting inside the measure, alluding to the false measure, using this outer appearance of justice and righteousness to cover over her corruption. And now he casts her inside the ephah, inside the lead. You'll be trapped forever. Vayashlech es even ho'aferes el pio. He now throws a stone of lead into her mouth, into the mouth of the measure, into the mouth of wickedness. She's trapped there forever. Well, here again we are somewhat in need of some words of Agadah to throw light on this very obscure image. And here we have the Agadah in the Talmud about how in the time of the Second Temple the sages prayed that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination for idolatry, would be put into their hands. This is from the Talmud in Tractate Yuma, Daf Samach Tes, page folio 69. 69. Vayomer Zeus Horish, or commentating on this verse. This is the epitome of wickedness. Says the Talmud there, our sages sat fasting for 3 days and 3 nights in order that they should gain control over the evil inclination for idolatry, which had destroyed the first temple. And here they were at the outset of the second temple, the men of the Great Assembly, fasting and praying that they should be able to overcome the evil inclination for idolatry. It should be delivered into their hands. And all of a sudden it came forth in the form of a lion of fire coming out from the Holy of Holies. The prophet, that is Zechariah, says, here is the evil inclination for idolatry. And that is what is said in our verses, Zeus, Vayomer Zeus Orisha. Here is the epitome of evil. The prophet, speaking the words of the angel, says to the people of his generation, according to the Talmud, here it is, here it is. Bahadida tafsua le ishtemit benisa bemezaya v'ramakala. While they were trying to catch it, it was able to slip out of their hands and cried out with the most bitter cry. And the cry went spreading over 400 miles. It could be heard. And hearing this terrible cry of pain of the evil inclination for idolatry was about to be vanquished, the sages said, what can we do? Perhaps because of this cry, they will have mercy on it from the heavens. The prophet said, quick, cast it into this pot of lead and cover over the mouth of it, because the lead will absorb the cry and it won't get out. And that's what the verse continues to say. He cast it into the ephah, into this lead vessel. Well, make of that what you will. These are obviously very mysterious verses. One thing I think is plain that we need to understand is that aside from this mashal that the sages wanted to get the evil inclination for idolatry under control, so it would no longer afflict the people of Israel, but it should be said that Rabbi Nachman states that all idolatry ultimately stems from the desire for material wealth and material security. Idolatry is rooted in the appetite for wealth, and it's the previous prophecy about the corrupt measures which they were also trying to get under control is really one of the most important roots of the Torah that did emanate from the Second Temple, and that is the Torah of Dinei Mamanot, the laws of property, which were regularized by the men of the Great Assembly as they come down to us in our oral Torah in Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra, and the other tractates of Hilchos of Seder Nezikin in the Mishnah. And I think this can be also seen in the ensuing verses, which we now turn to. So yet another of these mysterious prophecies, Vo'eso Einai, verse 9 in the Hebrew text, Zechariah chapter 5. Vo'eso Einai, vo'eire, ve'hinei, Shtayim noshim yoitzois, veruach bechanefeihem, v'loheno chenofayim kechanefei hahasido, v'tisoeno es ho'efo bein ha'oretz uvein hashomoyim. I lifted up my eyes, says the prophet. Now I looked and I saw two women coming forth with the spirit or the wind in their wings. And to them were wings. Those women had wings like the wings of the stork. Vatisoeno esoefo, they lifted up this measure, this kever, this grave of the evil inclination, and this source of the curses that will come forth against the wicked. They carry it bein ha'oretz uvein hashamayim, between the earth and between the heavens. Now, Metzudat David helps explain to us the components of the metaphor here between the earth and between the heavens. Between the earth and between the heavens, says the Metzudat David, comes the rakia, the firmament, which divides between the heavens and the earth. In other words, the shomayim are the far, far off, remote outer space of the universe. The eretz is the earth, and the wind is carrying, these women with the wind in their wings are carrying this ephah there in the skies. Verse 10, V'oimar el hamaloch adoi vebi, no, hema molichois es uefo. I said to the angel speaking in me, well, whither are they bringing the ephah? V'hiyomer elai livnois lo vayis be'eretz shin'ol v'huchan v'hunicho shom al mechunoso. He said to me, this angel said to the prophet, taking it to build for her a house in the land of Shinar. Shinar is known from Genesis onwards as a term for the land of Babylon. V'uchan, there it shall be established. V'hunicho shom al mechunto, there it shall be set down upon its stand. So again, we are in need of our commentators to help us to elucidate the imagery here. It says Rashi on these verses, the two women coming forth are coming again forth from the temple. The temple is a source of law and order coming forth to the whole world. And the Targum on our verse, Targum Yonatan on verse 9, takes us in a rather different direction. Targum to verse 9, Uzakofis einai v'chazis v'ho sarten medinon galion levene malkavos amame ar'o. I lift up my eyes, says the prophet, and I saw there are two states or two kingdoms that are going out into exile among the empires of the nations of the earth. V'amamin kalilin miglanios hoin bakalilu, and nations, light nations, despicable nations, are taking them into exile very easily. Just like an eagle is being swooping through the skies. Vaglios amod havanasvin vayahavin b'mechilto deshikro. They are taking out into exile the people that have been taking and giving, that is to say, merchandise exchange, buying and selling, b'mechilto deshikro, with a measure of falsehood. Taking them out into exile among the nations of the peoples of the land that is under all of the skies. And in verse 10, Targum says, I said to the angel who's speaking in me, well, where are they taking these people into exile? That have been on account of the sin of measuring with a false measure. He says to me to prepare them a place in Babylon until their time will come. Well, before we leave this section, let's just note that chapter 6 of Zechariah is a continuation of this cycle of prophecies, where now he's going to see the 4 chariots, an elaboration of the vision of the horsemen that he saw beginning in chapter 1 verse 7. And as we shall see in our commentators, the vision of the 4 chariots is a vision of the specter of all of the coming exiles. So we hear already the severe warning to the people by the prophet that all of this is coming out essentially on account of false measurements. And indeed, if the people will measure falsely, there will be the retribution from God against them of all of the exiles, the very sharp point of which is the exile of Edom, Amalek. And this all comes about on account of judging with false measures, that is to say, judging without adequately examining the facts and coming to false conclusions, and therefore imposing unjust verdicts and punishments. So we see that this is a very stern warning here in this cycle of prophecies by the prophet to the people of his generation up to our time about the fundamental importance of the pillar of justice upon which the whole edifice stands. So with that, we conclude our studies of Hebrew prophets for today, and we'll have a short interval after we'll come back to the study of Likutei Moharan of Rabbi Nachman. Shalom again, my dear friends. Let us now continue with our studies for today, coming to Likutei Moharan. Shalom, today, the 24th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5778, corresponding to the 7th of June of the year 2018, as we continue now with our study of Likutei Moharan, Chelek Aleph, the first volume of the original Hebrew printing, Torah Dalet, the fourth Ma'amar, the fourth discourse. In section Tet, the ninth section of the discourse, which we had already entered into this very intricate discussion, which follows through on the counsel of Rabbi Nachman that the summit of the association between the Israelite soul and the tzaddik, the chacham, the Torah sage, is through confession, which, as we noted, is not a single one-time act, but a continuous process, and as we've mentioned, can be applied in our times through an ongoing order of hitbodedut, of personal prayer to God in our lives day by day, where we accomplish these same tikkunim. And Rabbi Nachman had begun this section by explaining that the whole process of the confession is embodied in the Hebrew musical note zarko, of the notes of cantillation of the Torah and the Tanakh. The zarko is a note which, as it were, is thrown up outwards to the heavens. The voice is raised up, and this is symbolic of the act of teshuvah, where one throws out one's desires and longings to the infinite God, to the place from which one's soul was taken. And this is indeed what this whole teaching is about, how we must restore the malchut, the kingdom, where we live under the rule of the kingdom in this world, and we sometimes most of the time experience this world as ruling over us in a way where God seems to be hidden from the world as it confronts us. We need to connect the kingdom back to the infinite, and to find the underlying will that lies behind all of the revealed manifestations of will as we find them in this world. Because as we've learned, and I'm running through the earlier part of the section just briefly, because the attribute of malchut is made up of that weave of letters and words of the Torah, all of which are themselves a garb for the will and desire of God. He made each letter and each form to be as it is, and it's out of that God's providence over the whole universe is manifested. It all comes through the Torah, and our work is to understand that behind the yeshut, behind the being of the world, the existence of the world, which comes from God's attribute of the kingdom, which brings this real, actual, material, concrete, touchable, tangible world into being. Behind this is God's will that brought it all into being through these letters of the Torah, and into that Rabbi Nachman brought the section from the Talmud saying about how every place you find in the Torah and the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim, all of the holy writings, wherever you find a mention of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greatness of the Holy One, His kindness and goodness, and His malchut, there you find His humility. Behind all of the revealed malchut, all of the manifested wills and desires in the world, lies the hidden source, that is the ultimate will of Eyn Sof. And to gain connection with this, which is how eventually our souls return to their source, this requires hispashtus hagashmius, peeling off from ourselves our material dimension. We have little by little to enhance, to elevate, and to peel off the material outer a klipa in order to attach oneself to Eyn Sof. When one wants to be absorbed in the ultimate keter, the crown, the desire or the will of Eyn Sof, we have to nullify our yeshut, nullify our material aspect. And it's then that Rabbi Nachman now brings in the figure of Moshe. And let's remember that this whole vidui is an interactive vidui confession with the tzaddik, who is the embodiment of Moshe. So the Jewish Israelite soul coming in with the vidui to the Torah sage is sitting before Moses, and Moses, the Zohar says, Moses ascended to the heavens at the time of supreme grace and will on Shabbat afternoon, when the will of wills, the will that underlies all of the manifested wills, that ultimate will, the will of Keter, the crown, is revealed at that time, and that is where Moses ultimately ascended. And that's the source of all the wills manifested in the world. And Moses achieved this because he successfully nullified all of his material existence, as he says in the portion of the manna, Exodus chapter 16, we are ma, we are what? We are purely transparent, we are nothing. And that's why the Torah, speaking of the burial of Moses, says that God buried him in the guy in the valley, which is the aspect of humility, as it's written in the prophet Isaiah, that every valley will be elevated. And this is in the land of Moab. The land of Moab is emblematic of Malchut. King David came ultimately from Moab, where his great-grandmother Ruth was the daughter of the king, and it's there that Moshe was ascending into Eyn Sof, within the will that within all wills, which is the ultimate will of wills, which is garbed in all of the manifested wills in the world, in the forms of the Hebrew letters, which are the source of all that is manifested in the universe. And that was the point to which we had studied in our previous section, and our sages commented on why specifically Moses was buried at that point in Moab, mul Peor, against Peor. Moses was the tikkun of this ultimate idolatry, which is the source of all other sins. Peor, who is called by the name of Peor on account of this mysterious service of that idol, where the person turns their backside and opens their buttocks and exposes the mouth of their anus to the idol, the very opposite of holiness. When the malchut is downgraded, it's pulled down into the filth and the dirt. When a person blemishes the aspect of malchut, when the person takes their spiritual powers through which they have the ability to rule over their lives, and they use this power to serve their own evil desires. When the person sins, that is when they have the power to open their mouth with bad permutations of these letters. They twist it all. אבל מוישה שתיקן מן המלכוס, על די זה היה יכול ביד פאור לפאור פי, לא היה יכול ביד פאור לפאור פי, but Moses, who rectified the attribute of Malchut, the kingdom. He taught people the way to take upon themselves the kingdom of heaven, to escape the wicked tyranny of Pharaoh, the evil inclination. He took the people out of tyranny to this Egyptian tyrant and took them under the kingship of God. Through this, there was no longer power in the evil inclination to open its mouth. That's why in the account of the burial of Moses it writes, no man knew. Even Moses did not know which level he'd come to. Why? There was no longer any Moses. Moses was completely nullified before the infinite. But this only took place at the time of the death and the ascent of Moses, his final absorption into Eyn Sof. Certainly in his lifetime too, he had this level of divesting himself of his material aspect. He was attaching himself to the light of the infinite. However, this divestment from the material could only, during his lifetime, his physical lifetime, come about in that aspect of the angels depicted by Ezekiel, running forth but returning, like the lightning flashing across the sky from one side back to the other, running and returning. Likewise, Moses could only attain this fleeting connection with Eyn Sof, but had to come back during his physical lifetime into the physical vessel of the body. The reason is that the Holy One, blessed be He, desires our service in our bodies, in our lives, in this world. As is written, and the Rebbe here quotes a phrase from the Piyutim, from the liturgy of the added poems and elegies of the high holidays. You, we say in our prayers to God, you have desired praise specifically from clods of earth, clods of afar, the lowest of the element, the material element. God desires praise specifically from us. We are agglomerations of material substance. Mikrutze chomer, we're made from chomer, from clay, from a likrot is to, for example, pull a piece of dough to put it into shape. Krutze chomer, we are lumps of clay. For this reason, it is necessary that the person must not stay in this state of bitul, the state of complete self-effacement and sort of inclusion in Eyn Sof, in the infinite. One can only stay there. One may not stay there permanently until the time when the Holy One, blessed be He, will come Himself to take the person's soul. Because God does not want us to stay, to remain in this world in a state of constant transcendence. He wants us specifically to go back into the material. Now, Rabbi Nachman will explain a phenomenon that we actually can see with our eyes as occurs in the prayer services of assemblies of people who are praying fervently the prayer service. Sometimes a person, as they go through the daily prayers, will suddenly take fire in the middle of the prayer, and they will come forth with several words of the prayer with tremendous fire and passion. This phenomenon of a sudden spirit of fervor comes through the mercy of God upon the person, that the light of Eyn Sof is opened up to the person and shines to the person. Now, when the person sees this flash of infinite light during their devout prayers, even if the person does not see, certainly not with their physical eyes, their mazal, their soul powers do see and apprehend the sudden opening of the divine light sent to them by God in their prayers. Immediately, the person's soul takes fire with tremendous fervor, to attach himself or herself to the light of the infinite. According to the measure of the revelation of the infinite granted now to this person, according to the number of the words during which the lights of Eyn Sof were opened up and were flashing to them, all of those words the person says in their prayers now with tremendous devotion, attachment, with absolute surrender of their soul and with the nullification of all of their powers. And now we get to what Rabbi Nachman is getting at all along in this mimer. Before we mention this point, let's just say that here we see that for Rabbi Nachman, the attachment to the light of Eyn Sof comes first and foremost at the very height of the recital of our prayers, or at the height of Hitbodedut, where there are moments where, after all of our efforts out of this material world to get ourselves moving, to get ourselves into the world, to get our kavanah into the words, to feel, to be inside the words, all of a sudden we reach the takeoff point when Eyn Sof takes over and opens up to us, takes us outside and beyond ourselves. So here we see that this is a path of devotion where, through the continuing interaction of the Israelite soul with the tzaddik, each time confessing more, each time peeling off more layers of the physical material ego, the person gets more and more opened up to the light of Eyn Sof. And then continues the Rebbe here in this teaching, at the moment in the person's devotion, in their prayers and hitbodedut, when the person is, at the hour when the person is nullified before the infinite, they become absorbed and subsumed. At that moment, the person enters the category in the phrase of Moses, of the burial of Moses, no man knew. At that moment, the person himself or herself does not know of themselves. They're completely effaced beyond the ego. But this level, this experience, this aspect of our devotional life must be in the mode of running and returning, in order that the person's yesh, their material being, should endure, should continue. Because God wants the service specifically of us clods of earth, clods of clay, and therefore we have to come back out of this transcendental state into our bodies, into our material lives and being. Out of all this discussion comes forth now that when the person now returns into the level of the shov, the return, coming back into the material world, the reality check, as it were, the person now must show to their immanent ego consciousness, their da'at. They've got to bring back from the moment of transcendence some message, some residue that which makes this whole journey so beneficial. Initially, at the time of the devotion, when the person went into transcendental state, the da'at, the conscious awareness, was itself nullified. As the verse states of Moses, the man did not know, no man knew, there was no knowledge, no consciousness. But when the person is coming back onto the level of the return, that the person returns to their consciousness and to their physical being, as shav ledato, then the person comes back into consciousness. Now, when the person comes back into their consciousness, now, after having had that moment of transcendence, the person now knows is cognizant of the unity of the infinite and of his goodness. And this is the point where we started this whole teaching. When a person knows that everything that happens is for their good, this they can gain this knowledge and cognizance in the material world through this path of devotion with its moments of transcendence, when they gain this vision and bring it back into the world. And at that moment of transcendence, they now attain this knowledge of the unity. At that moment, there's no distinction or division between the aspect of Hashem, the aspect of kindness, of chesed, and the aspect of Elokim, the aspect of severity and judgment and discipline. It's no distinction, they're all one. The aspect of judgment, the aspect of kindness, they're all one. Eyn Sof on the level of the infinite, it's not relevant, God forbid, to make any distinctions of any change from one desire to another. All of the changes and the distinctions, the good days, the bad days, the good things, the bad things, all of these only come about on account of the change in the temunot, the Hebrew letters. These are the tzimtzumim, when the divine powers which originate in unity descend from level to level, from the world of Atzilut, from the world of emanation, down level by level into the world of Bria, Yitzira, and Asiyah. These powers are contracted into the form of the letters, and that is where there are distinctions with the Aleph, the Bet, the Gimel, the Chof, the Mem, the Tzadik, and all the other letters, and these bring forth all the distinctions between the different manifestations within creation. But through a person's attachment to the Eyn Sof, through the infinite, through this journey of devotion, Shesham ein shinui ratzon, there on the level of Eyn Sof, there is no distinction, no difference of desire ever. Ki sham ratzon pashut, the whole ratzon, the whole desire and will of the crown is entirely simple. It's all one. So through this devotional experience, where the person now, after the moment of transcendence, returns to their material being, afterwards there is left in the person the trace of this vision of unity. Afterwards, this trace turns into the aspect of the return. The person returns into their material being. Then this trace of this memory of the transcendence that is left in the soul now radiates to the person's consciousness. He will now know and understand and believe and absolutely experience that it is all good and all one. And it was this that Moses was saying to his generation, Deuteronomy chapter 4, you have been shown to know that the Lord is God. Hashem is the same as Elokim, the attribute of kindness and the attribute of discipline and severity are all one. You, the generation Moses was addressing, you have been shown, in other words, out of your transcendent experience at Sinai of the absolute unity, you coming back down into yourselves, you have had shown into your da'as, your consciousness, the absolute unity of the two sides of the tree of the Sfirot, the side of Chesed and the side of Gevurah, kindness and strength. Ki Moshe ubechinas ayin. The reason that Moses had this power to show his generation, because Moses was the aspect of ayin, of self-effacement, of nothingness. For that reason, the generation that were attached to Moses, it was fit for them to know and understand. It was possible for them to have radiating into their consciousness, Bechinas Eyn Sof, the aspect that is beyond consciousness, beyond finite mind. The aspect of infinity was radiating into their finite consciousness. Radiating to them was Bechinas Rav the Ravim, the will of wills. Bechinas Hashem Elokim, they saw that the will behind all wills, that it's all one, the Lord, He is God. With that, the ensuing section of this Mama will now turn to the tale of Rabbi Baba Chana in the Talmud, which Rabbi Nachman will now, in the following section, explain on the foundation of all of the introductions he's given us so far in this teaching. And to that we will come with the help of God in our coming session. My friends, we're getting some feedback here. I'm not quite sure why as yet. Let me try to solve this problem. I will have to close off here. Not sure why this is happening. I will have to say my goodbyes to you right now. I hope you will get the last part of this broadcast. Very sorry about this. Well, it must sound rather strange to you if you're hearing what I'm hearing. If not, then well and good. And I wish you Shavuot Tov. We'll meet again, God willing, on Sunday a week on June 17th. Shalom from Jerusalem.